You can't heal what you hate, Cory whispered to himself, watching the Florida sun disappear behind the courthouse where it had all begun. Weeks earlier, Senator Cory Booker had arrived in Tampa with a mission. He wasn't there for cameras or soundbites. He came for a quiet challenge, not a legal one, but a human one, aimed directly at former Attorney General Pam Bondi. Bondi, known for her no-nonsense style and controversial prosecutions, was hosting a justice reform summit. Cory, a lifelong advocate for prison reform and second chances, had requested to speak. Privately, people whispered it was a provocation. After all, she had once opposed many of the very changes he championed. But Cory wasn't there to argue policy. He was there for something deeper, a story he hadn't shared publicly. Not even on the Senate floor. It began 15 years ago, in Newark. Cory had just become mayor. A young man, Darnell, barely 18, had been sentenced to 25 years for a nonviolent drug offense. Cory had met him once, during a school visit. Darnell had dreams. Real ones. Music, mentoring, fatherhood. But the system swallowed him whole. Cory never forgot the look on Darnell's mother's face when the verdict was read. It haunted him. That moment made prison reform personal. So when he took the podium at Bondi's summit, he spoke softly, not as a politician, but as a man broken by stories like Darnell's. Pam Bondi listened, stoic, arms crossed, the room silent. Then Cory did something no one expected. He stopped talking about policy and told them about Darnell. He spoke of forgiveness. He told the room that he wasn't here to battle Pam, but to ask, what would happen if we cared more than we judged? If we built bridges instead of walls? The crowd erupted in quiet murmurs. Some skeptical, some moved. Pam Bondi stood up, walked to the mic. People braced for the clash. But what came next silenced the air. Pam didn't defend her record. She didn't quote statistics. Instead, she told the room about her brother, Caleb. How he'd spiraled after a bad divorce, ended up addicted, arrested, forgotten. How she, even as Attorney General, couldn't save him from the system she'd helped create. He died in prison. No cameras caught that, she said. No headlines reported my failure as a sister. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Then she looked at Cory. I've spent years defending laws that I now know need changing. You came to challenge me. But you gave me something else. You gave me permission to change. That was the massive move. Not a rebuttal. Not a press statement. She resigned from her post that very night and announced the launch of a nonprofit dedicated to expunging nonviolent criminal records, starting with Darnell's. Weeks later, Cory and Pam stood side by side outside a halfway house in Tallahassee. Darnell walked out, carrying nothing but a duffel bag and a hesitant smile. You two did this? He asked, looking from Cory to Pam. No, Pam said softly. You did. You made it worth it. Darnell's mom wept quietly nearby. The emotional climax wasn't just freedom. It was redemption. For Darnell. For his mother. For Pam. The story went viral. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was human. People around the country, from Newark to Nashville, Toronto to Manchester, started talking not about politics but about people. How real change doesn't come from shouting across aisles, it comes from listening across pain. In the end, Cory returned to Washington. Pam stayed in Florida, working in communities she once prosecuted. He became a counselor. His first client, a boy arrested for shoplifting, the same age he had been. Be better than I was, he told him. And if you can't, come find me. We'll get better together. Months passed. The ripples from that single moment in Tampa began to touch places neither Cory nor Pam had expected. In Des Moines, a judge cited the Tampa summit when reducing a first-time offender's sentence. In Detroit, a prosecutor launched a second-chance mentorship program and called it, The Bridge. In Calgary, a young politician wrote to Pam, saying her transformation gave him the courage to speak against outdated policies in his own party. Pam received letters. Hundreds of them. Some angry. Most grateful. But one letter stood out. It was from the father of a man she had once put behind bars for 30 years. Your decision to step away from power, he wrote, was the first time I saw justice through the eyes of mercy. Pam kept that letter in her bag, right next to the photo of her brother Caleb. Cory, meanwhile, had grown quieter in the Senate. Not because he'd lost passion, but because he was listening more. He was walking the neighborhoods. visiting halfway houses, sitting with forgotten people and writing policies rooted in their voices, not just statistics. One snowy evening in D.C., Pam called him. "You remember the boy?" she asked. "The one Darnell started mentoring." "Yeah, he's in court tomorrow. His second offense. He asked for you." Cory paused. "He flew that night." The courtroom was modest. A tired judge, a public defender flipping through notes. And in the corner, the boy, Jamal. 17. Chain around his ankle, shoulders hunched. But when he saw Cory walk in, his eyes lit up with something more powerful than relief. Hope. The judge allowed Cory to speak. Not as a senator, but as someone who had once mentored Darnell. And who now stood for Jamal. "I'm not here to excuse his mistake," Cory said, voice firm. "I'm here because someone once stood for me when I didn't deserve it. And that changed the path I walked." The judge looked at Jamal. "You want to walk a different path?" Jamal nodded slowly. "I do. But I don't know how." Pam, who had quietly slipped into the back of the courtroom, stood up. "We'll show you," she said. The emotional climax wasn't in a speech, or a sentence reduced. It was in what happened afterward. That night, Cory, Pam, and Darnell sat in a circle with Jamal at a community center. They didn't talk politics. They talked about pain, about failure, about starting over. Pam handed Jamal a journal. "This helped me when I had no one to talk to," she said. "Write your truth in here. And when you're ready, share it." He opened it and wrote only one sentence that night. "I think I was meant to meet you." The world often celebrates loud victories. But sometimes the quietest acts, listening, forgiving, showing up, leave the deepest marks. Today, Pam's organization, the Caleb Initiative, partners with schools and courts across 3 states. Darnell runs the mentorship program. Jamal, he's now one of the lead youth counselors. And Cory, he doesn't talk much about Tampa anymore. Because real change, he learned, doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs someone to go first. Final message. We all carry the power to rewrite someone's story, not with judgment, but with grace. And sometimes, the most massive move isn't opposition. It's compassion.